So welcome everybody to another edition of SoCal Soaring Porch Chats. Tonight we are welcome and excited to have a returning speaker, Dan Rihn. And Dan is going to give us a talk about the use of Condor, which is the Soaring app, in a way so you can start to stretch your wings and go cross country using this Condor Soaring app. So with that, just say that Dan, I think everybody here knows Dan's skills and longtime abilities, but well, what's your longest flight in the Sierra, Dan?
Just a little over 800K.
Great, yeah, nice. Okay, so that we'll let Dan take it away.
Thank you for having me again, and let's just go ahead and get started. This is about the Condor 2. It's the second version of the Condor Soaring simulator, and I got to say it's a pretty darn good simulator. In my professional life, I have flown many simulators, mostly tactical stuff for high performance aircraft. But I've got to tell you, this is a pretty darn good simulator for what they charge, and so I think it's about $100 or so. But the latest version is Condor 2, and what I wanted to do was talk about how you can use this great little tool to help your cross-country flying. So these are the things that you can get out of it, and it's both great for a beginner or an expert. But you can learn how to declare a cross-country flight. You can learn how to set up a start and finish for a declared flight. And you can learn a lot about navigation, navigating to the turn points, correctly flying through a turn point. You can establish a final glide to finish. And it also kind of is a good way to learn how to use it's got a very fundamental glide computer, much more simple than an UDI or an LX nav, but the basics are there, and you can learn a lot about how to eventually use it, and then eventually move on to some of the more advanced ones when you're flying in your own glider. You learn a lot about McCready, speed to fly. You learn about changing gears, going from thermal versus cruise flying. And once you start flying the more advanced gliders, you'll learn a lot about flaps, water ballast, wing loading, and I'll show you how that you set that up. And also you can learn a lot about how to thermal better. And a lot of what Bill Palmer had a while back on learning how to thermal or thermaling better, centering thermals. You can practice all of those things in Condor, and it's pretty darn good, I've found. I don't know if the other people here have had a good experience that I've had, but several of those techniques that Bill, well, all of the techniques, I should say, that Bill was talking about, I've tried and played around with on Condor. They all work great. And I'll show you a few other tricks that you can play too on Condor. A lot on decision making and course deviation, because thermals don't always line up exactly the way you want to fly your declared path. So you learn a little bit about that. Probably one of the biggest things that I've found is the familiarization with geography. And this is certainly true for beginners when they're trying to cut the apron strings and move out, and they're flying in areas they've never flown before. But even for the experts, that have a lot of cross-country experience. I know whenever I go to a new site, I always go onto Condor first and look at some of the other flights on OLC, so I can understand, the direction of the winds, where the good spots are for thermaling, things like that. And then I go in and fly some flights in Condor. I did this when I went to Parowan the first couple times. I've also done it for Minden and Carson City and up in that area and a few other places too. But it really helps when you finally get there, say, oh yeah, this is very familiar. I know where I am. So it's a lot of fun to do that kind of work with Condor. And at this time of year, when it's raining and snowing, it's great practice during the off season. So I've set up a very short little cross country to show you folks how to set it up. And this is out of Mountain Valley. I think can you see my pointer here?
Yep.
Okay. Down here is where I started, and That's at, sorry, it looks like Tom Riley's trying to call me. You'll have to wait. That's actually at Dead Car. And I'm going to fly out to the rock pile. That'll be my first turn point. And I'm going to go over here. And this is a turn point that's not listed on Condor. On the this is on the landscape that was actually created by Jim Ketchum, another one of our great cross-country pilots, who, by the way, had a great wave flight today, best in the U.S. flight today.
Wow. Nice.
Yeah. And but I know where this is, and obviously he's overlaid the sectional on his landscape, so you can see where Flying S Ranch is. That's a pretty prominent landscape or landmark. So I use that for my second turn point, and then all the way back. So it's kind of a wonky triangle. It's not quite an FAI triangle. We'll talk more about that later. But I've set it over here where I've got my takeoff out of Tehachapi, Dead Car, rock pile, new turn point, because it doesn't have a name when you click on one that doesn't exist, but that's the Flying S Ranch. And then back to Dead Car. Set the date. I typically use, the good time of the season in here. I'm not sure if that really plays a role with the weather or not, but that's how I always do it. I've had trouble when I've used a future date. I know that's for sure when I go back and look at some of the analysis later on. And I put in a 12 o'clock start, or takeoff, I should say. 10 minutes is when the race, this is really set up for competition. So the start gate for when we're going to be starting it's open will be in 10 minutes. And I usually give it a pretty good size window in case I don't get there in time. So I put in 30 minutes here. So that gives you 30 minutes to get high enough and get a good start. And unfortunately with Condor, it's not like the real way we do the start and finish. Typically we use a start line. It uses a sector. So you see these funny looking little triangles. Those are the sector for the start and the sector for the finish. And you can see that now sectors for turn points are very common, but typically we use a straight line, but that's fine. That's a minor thing. Then you have to set up the weather for the task. Now, I typically, when I don't know the location, like I mentioned earlier, I'll try to look at weather from past flights and see what the guys were flying in. But Tehachapi is pretty simple because I fly there a lot. So I put in a wind at 91 degrees at 10 knots, pretty typical. Low variation, it's pretty constant. Maybe we'd always wish it's only 10 knots at Tehachapi, right? Then you go over to the thermals. There's a couple of ways you can do this. You can actually go over here on the right-hand side. You have these are various ways you can just put in an automatic, if you don't want to go through all what I'm going to show you, of setting the thermals. And it goes all the way to the one I love is bombastic, and it's rolling the dice here. And that's pretty wild sometimes. Or you can go to custom. And that's what I've done here is I've put in a custom day. And I've slid out the temperature all the way out and the inversion up to about 15,000 feet. So that's pretty normal for what we're going to see in Tehachapi on a good day. Strength is moderate for the thermals, and you can put these more if you want with this normal. I don't really know what the sizes for these thermals are. I know when you make them large, they're really big. If you make them small, they're really small. So I just use normal all the time. Activity normal, and then variations, I put these all on low. And a fair bit of turbulence. Sometimes I'll crank that up a little bit more because it gets pretty turbulent flying out of Tehachapi. So we've got a cloud base. It's pretty high because I've drug it out here, and you can see it's going to be up around 13,000 feet. And as I mentioned, the variation is low, moderate strength. Turbulence is moderate. Flats, maybe Walt can help us with what flats are, but I put those as normal, and streeting is none. Sometimes I put it in, sometimes I don't. Then you have to pick a glider. You have what's called a hanger, and you can either get a default set of gliders that come when you purchase your Condor subscription, or you can actually add more. And I've added a few. I've got a 126E in there because I have a 126, JS1 21 meter, I use that one because they don't have an ASH-31 with a 21 meter, so I use that one when I'm flying. They do have a self-launch though, and I've used this one quite a bit. It's the DG-808C self-launch, and that's pretty nice to be able to self-launch and fly around like I would normally do with my own glider when I can self-launch. There's a lot more of others you can choose from in Condor. They've really got a pretty good array. So when you pick your glider, you go on to the next portion of it is your settings. And this is where you actually get the glide puller for the glider you're flying. And this is what's important because you start learning how to change the wing loading right here. And as I've shown over here on the the JS1 21 meter glider, I've cranked that up a little bit. I've put in some ballast, and that slides the polar from the normal standard position down the glide slope to a little bit further to the right. And it's showing the max LRD right at 66 knots. And you can also change the bias if you like with the CG. I don't usually do that. I just leave it at 0 just to so it trims out nicely. But you can, and this is what we're going to fly today. And the flight I've got is 10 pounds per square foot. That's typically what I fly at. And as compared to my 126, which is way down there. Now this is important because later on when you start using your UDI or your LXNav or ClearNav or any of the fancier computers, you'll have to do all of this as well to be sure that you have your polar in the proper position for the MacCready that you're going to be setting and the final glides that you're going to have. All right, so let's get going. So in the upper left here, this is the view you see. I don't know if you've all have flown Condor or not, so I'll kind of walk through a little bit of this. But that's Tehachapi, and you can see the windmill ridge is, we're looking to the east now, so we're taking off on runway 9. Tow plane is taxiing out, getting into position. And it looks like a nice clear sunny day there. Not a lot of, only some high cloud wisps. So when we take off, just like when we're towing in real life, you want to start looking around and look for where the clouds are. And then you can see some clouds here. Now I've played a little trick on it you can do on Condor, done two things. One is I've clicked on what's called thermal helper. And this would be nice if we had this in real life. But you see these lines here? That's where the thermal is, right there, going up to make that cloud. And this one here hasn't quite made a cloud yet, but that's a new one. It's going to be a great thermal pretty soon. And you can see there's some here that we're flying by. So typically I'll do that. I don't always do that. I try to fly with the thermal helper as little as possible. Also, I've shown the start turn point. That's the dead car right there on the ridge. And these in light purple are the start and finish quadrants that you fly through. So that's kind of nice when you're first learning how to fly these types of flights, is to understand where you're going and where you're navigating. And it is a little bit hard in Condor at first because you don't have the same situational awareness that you would have when you're flying in a real airplane. It's kind of like looking through a soda straw. And you can slew the view around quite a bit. I know Jim Ketchum uses virtual reality goggles, and I'm sure that helps a lot. Mm-hmm. And then, so I'm flying towards the start point here. And now the map always stays in north orientation, north up orientation. So here we are, we're on tow, and you can see that the start is over here where I was pointing to in this view. It's directly ahead, and we're flying right up towards it. You know, the bald spot's right up here on the ridge as well. And when I turn that off and we start climbing, you can see, well, now we're looking more towards the north here. And it's got clouds all over the place. It looks like we got clouds that are going off towards the direction that we're going to be flying. So this is going to be a good day. So we're released and we start climbing up to set our task. And I've climbed up now and I'm about at 9,400 feet. This is the view that I have. Now it's a little awkward because, as I said, I'm having to look at the map here to try to get where my start is. But until you get used to that, what you can do in Condor is go ahead and show the start. Here's the very start of where dead car is. And this is the quadrant. Now, if you can see that, I'm going to be flying right into the side of the coming east to west here, or sorry, west to east, flying into that quadrant. And that's when I'll get a start. Now, when you start flying for real, you want to have a finish altitude that must not be lower than 1,000 meters than you start. And it doesn't have to, but if you do go lower, you will not get the NFAI triangle, and you won't get all the points that you can get for it. So you want to start learning how to do that all the time. But one of the things that you can see is that if you have a finish that's too low for safety, that's not good either. Now, if I were to fly at 6,000 feet up there at the dead car, that's a little lower than I would like to be. So you wouldn't want to do that. But just for round numbers, always remember your start, and then know that you have 3,000 feet as a round number below that for your finish altitude. In this case, I wouldn't say that would be a good one. You'd want to use about 7,500 feet or so for that safety. And down here at the lower right-hand corner, you can see that I'm just started, and I'm going to be going off on course now, off to the north here, northeast to the first turn point, which would be the rock pile. So now we're on course, and just like when you'd be flying for real, these nice clouds are kind of lining up the way you hope they would. Rock piles out there somewhere. And then using the flight computer on Condor, this is my turn point to the rock pile. This shows where that turn point is, left or right, and I'm pretty much aimed at it right now. And I'll go through all of these here. This is the bearing and the heading to that turn point. The distance is 26.52 nautical miles away. I'm going pretty fast because I just started and I'm 80 knots. Time to go is 19 minutes away. That is if I continue to go at this pace. ETA is at 12:36 Pacific Standard Time, I guess. And then there's actually several pages in this computer. And the next page that you can go to is showing how you're doing on glide. Now, this red dot is showing that if it is above this center, this bullseye here, that means I'm actually below glide, and quite a bit below glide, as you'll see. And that's flying at a McCready 3.5. And I've set that in here because I had a pretty good thermal. So I thought, well, okay, the rest of the thermals are going to be about 3.5 right now. I put that in. Again, the distance, 26 nautical miles. DH is the current altitude above or below the turn point. And that's not, we're 3,200 feet above the turn point, but by the time we get there, we're going to be 1,148 feet below the turn point. That's bad. So we're going to have to get a good climb into one of these clouds, at least one of these clouds, as we head off towards the rock pile. This is time to go. That'll change as we move forward. And because like I say, that's assuming everything is good for right now. And like I say, we're going to have to climb some more. So we hit our first thermal under this cloud right up here. And I crank right into it, nice and steep. And you can see in my thermal page that they have in Condor in its flight computer, I'm thermaling, I'm circling, and it's pretty much like you would see in any of the modern computers. You know, I'm in the red the whole time, so I'm climbing nicely, 4.5 knots, and I'm doing nice good circles. You also see the wind drift. Obviously, it's still from this is a north orientation, as I mentioned, so this is from the east. And you can see where I am on the path. I'm about not even halfway to the rock pile. But one of the tricks you can play, which is kind of neat, is you can use those techniques that I mentioned earlier that Bill was talking about. Once you think you're in the thermal and doing really well thermal, turn on the thermal helper, and you can look down your wingtip and see where that center of the thermal really is. And I found this very surprising a few times. I'm thermaling away thinking I'm right in it, and I do this, and the center of the thermal is a long way from where I am. So that's kind of good. And in this particular case, I nailed it pretty good. We're flying right around the center. The red is the good part, the hot air. So we're coming up on the rock pile, we're getting close. We've got about 2 minutes to go. Only about 4 miles, 3.96 nautical miles to go. It's dead ahead, but that's as you can see, that's what it looks like out there. It's pretty hard to see, but you'll learn that more the more you fly. And this is exactly the way it looks when you're flying a real glider. And you can see that we're coming up on the turn point over here on the right. And when you're cruising, you can switch the vario over to speed control. So it's not acting just like a pure vario anymore. Now it's showing with the MacCready that you've put in. I've cranked it up to 4.5, and this is a speed to fly. So obviously it's like any other speed to fly device. If the needle is high, that means you should slow down. If it's down here, you should speed up. So, and that's set with the MacCready that you put in. So as I said, it's kind of hard to tell where you're going at first until you get used to this. So I'll go ahead and, use a little cheater switch here. And okay, there's the rock pile. And here's the quadrant I've got to fly to. Now, these quadrants are kind of interesting. Sometimes it works out when you're flying cross country, especially when you get up in the mountains, that the turn point you chose may not be a good place to go exactly to that turn point. It may actually be better to kind of nick the quadrant out here. That's happened to me several times. I'm sure it's happened to a lot of the other guys as well. It's easier and better if there's a cloud way over here you want to get to, or you're getting low and this is over low ground and the turn point's over high ground, then you're going to want to just nick it and move on. But you can see over here in the lower right hand side, I'm coming right up on the turn point. There's the sector in green, and we're going to cross that turn point and go on to the next one. So now we're going off to second turn point, Flying S Ranch. And right away, your computer flips over to the next turn point. And as you can see, now I have plenty of altitude to get to that turn point. But here's what I'm looking at. The turn point's on the other side of that ridge. Maybe that's not such a good idea, to just tear off towards that turn point. You're going to want to get more altitude, obviously. And again, little trick, look at the clouds. And Condor does a pretty good job of what we really see when we're flying gliders, is that many times the clouds will become old and stale. You're seeing the cloud, and by the time you fly there, it'll disappear right in front of you, just like when you're really flying a glider. Or you get there and there's no lift. And so you want to keep looking out all the time. And a lot of times you can just see little wispies, just like in real life, starting to appear. And those are the young ones, and those usually have good lift, especially by the time you get there. So that's good practice for flying cross country. Is just remember to keep looking out all the time. And also you're getting a lot of awareness of the terrain. If you're a newbie and you're going to be breaking those apron strings, what does the world look like out here? You've never flown out here before, so get in practice of looking around. Get in practice of looking around to become familiar with the area and where you're going. So we're getting closer to the Flying S Ranch now. It happens to be in this little valley over here, just up ahead. And again, keep your eyes out. This is just looking off the wingtip. You can see Paiute Peak off here in the distance. I guess it's more like over here. And we're coming right up on the turn point. And again, we're going to clip right through that sector and then turn and get on our final glide here in just a little bit. So we're going to turn that point at 10,000 feet, which is plenty high enough. I did a thermaling. I thermaled up a little bit before crossing that ridge to get there. So now we're on final glide. And you got some decisions to make. If to finish, which you can see way off here in the distance is the dead car. I'm aimed right at it. And it's 21.88 miles away. Altitude right now, I've got just under 10,000 feet, but I got ridges that are ahead. And there's Q over here. So do I fly over here to go into these Q to get lift, or do I just keep on going straight? Well, if I leave it at MacCready 4.5, I'll be too low to make my finish. And I need about 7,500 to safely finish this flight. So I got two choices. I could slow down, reduce the McCready, or fly to the Q. And you can see over here at McCready 4.5, I'm not high enough. But if I continue to decrease the McCready, this little red ball will drop down and I can go all the way down to where it's below here. But it's usually pretty slow. You know, in this case, it probably would be a McCready of about 1, which is probably a little unrealistic. So that's usually not a good idea. So you want to make some decisions. And the decision is going to be to obviously fly over here where these clouds are, closer ones, maybe even that one. That's good when it's not too far away. So that's what I did. Got closer, and here I'm now flying under, I think I hit a bump right in here. This was a McCready 3.1 is actually what it took to get right on glide. But I hit a nice bump, and it was good thermal, 7 knots. So I started climbing like we saw before. And this time I've taken away all the cheaters. But you can see, again, it's still an east wind, and I'm climbing in good lift, 7.5 knots, 7.8 knots. So the top of the climb, when do you stop climbing? Well, it started weakening at 3.3. I probably went higher than I really needed to, but that's a good thing sometimes. And I want to get back on the final glide. And now at a McCready 7, I can easily reach the dead car. So that means I can go a whole lot faster, and that's a good thing. And I've still got good safety margin, the little bit more than 2,600 feet over, even at a McCready of 7. So I can go a whole lot faster. And you can see now I'm above that ridge in this view here, and dead cars off here distance. And that's going to be a nice, easy, fast glide. So now we're coming up on the dead car, and finished altitude 9,200 feet. So that's only a couple hundred feet below I started. So obviously that was a good, easy finish, well within the 3,000 foot, 1,000 kilometer, or 1 kilometer, I should say, height difference that you have to have. And what's really cool, when you complete your task, when you fly through it here, you get D. Rihn completed his task, and you get applause and a congratulations. That's real, you know, that never happens in real life, but that's what you get. And it's kind of fun. And then it's time to head home. And just like when you're flying for real, this is usually when I take a breather, chill out. You made it. Everything's good. Now you got to change gears again, because now you got to get ready for landing. So you start looking at the airport. There's Mountain Valley down there. Look at the wind, set up your pattern. Look down here at the wind tee, and you can see the wind tee still showing an east wind. So I'm going to fly over the airport, head on outbound, and then set up a 45-degree inbound to downwind and base. Downwind over here. Check the spoilers, get the gear down, do all the things you're normally supposed to do in your checklist. Base to final, land, and you made it. Pretty cool, huh? All in a little over an hour and a half. So when you're done, this is the fun part now. You get to analyze your flight. So you get back to the main menu, and there's a couple of things they have. They've got analyze flight, save the flight track, which is good to do as well. Save a replay, and then it continually makes a logbook of all your flying. But if you go to the analyze flight, it's got one really nice feature, is that you can export your IGC, your International Glide Council file, and close Condor. And this will put it into your C drive over on your computer. And you can call that up and look at your flight in CU, like we all like to do. And this is a better tool for analyzing your flight than what Condor has. And there's our flight. So you can see the thermals that I had. I had 1, 2, 3 to the rock pile, just one. That's all I needed to get over here to the Flying S Ranch. And then we flew down and we picked up this one over the ridge and came on in. All of this flying over here was prior to my start. You can, just like in CU, you can right click and have it optimize your flight, and you can see this is a pretty crummy triangle that I made, but if it had been an FAI triangle, it would have looked like this. But that's how they score it as well. They're going to give you a little extra points for flying a triangle. The OLC always likes triangles, so you get extra points for that. I'm going to get some extra points for this because I did fly a triangle, but it's not going to be the one that I flew. It's going to be optimized to this red triangle here. And you get a barogram, just like you're used to seeing. You can see the thermals that I took. Here's the start. This is the dead car. And you can look all the way across that altitude right here. You can see my finish. You see I was just a little bit lower than my start, well within, like I said, the 3,000 foot altitude band that you have, and plenty safe over the ridge. Not a problem there. So it was easy, obviously easy to get down over here to land at Mountain Valley Airport. Get all the normal statistics that you can find on CU. Number of thermals I took and my mean L over D, all those good kinds of things to look at. And so in essence, I had a flight like I would have loved to have had today. So that's how you can use this to help your cross country. It's good practice. This is just a short little flight. The one unfortunate thing, I remember one time I showed all this to Mark Grubb and he says, "Can you put it on fast forward?" And I said, "Yeah." You put it on bombastic and then you get great lift, and you put yourself in a Nimbus or something with the L over D greater than 60-to-1, you can fly real fast. But no, it's real time. There are some nice things in Condor you can do. One of them is pause. You can hit pause. You can go to the restroom, you can get a sandwich or a drink or whatever you need. But it's if you fly a real long cross country, and it's you're going to be there just as long as you would be to normally fly it. Anyways, like to open it up for questions or discussion or anything you guys would like to talk about.
Can you reposition it to you have fixed waypoints? For example, let's say we want to have a lesson where let's practice diverting to this certain airport, and I want to have a preposition to where you would divert from, that you can still make it to the alternate from, or whatever.
So
you have to learn that.
You can. What you can do is let's see, how would you, so if you had, let's say you had planned this flight and it wasn't going well, is that what you're trying to say? And then so I realized I couldn't make it, so I'm going to say go over here and land at Cal City, something like that. Is that what you had in mind?
Well, for example, I think what I have in mind is for our airport, like I want the students to be able to find the alternate, which is Agua Caliente, is kind of hidden behind a ridge. So instead of having to soar over to the place where you divert, it's okay, we're going to start here where you have to, here's where we are, we're by Julian VOR, whatever. And, to start the lesson there so we can, do this diversion as part of a pre-planned lesson instead of just, going out, let's go fly, something that's like, okay, for this lesson, we're going to learn how to navigate to this particular, alternate, and what it looks like and how to get there, and how to find it.
Yeah, you can put in whatever you want as far as where you want to start and where you want you have to take off from an airport that has this little green symbol on it, which I believe Warner Springs has.
Yeah.
And that's set up again by Jim Ketchum. I know when I wanted to start flying out of Carson City, it didn't have that. So I asked him to change that airport, and he did it in a heartbeat, and off I went. But the takeoff is just for the tow part of it, or self-launch. Now you can actually determine if you want to just skip the aero tow part, because aero towing is kind of awkward in Condor, but it's a good practice. You can actually have it be at an altitude, preset altitude, and it'll be right over your takeoff airport. So that's good and bad. It's bad in that you don't have to tow. It's bad in that you're only over the airport. If you're typically the lift is quite a ways away from the airport, well, then now you're going to use all that altitude just to get where the lift is.
Right,
But
so
yeah,
can
you
can you reposition the
while you're
simulation
flying.
to any spot that you want? Yeah, whatever, freeze it, move it, whatever. Like any real flight simulator would allow the instructor to do that.
Not once you've set it up and they're going. You would have to set that up in front of,
Yeah.
of the flight. This
Okay.
is typically set for cross-country racing. Matter of fact, there was a group that were having weekly virtual races all over the world, that would all meet at a certain time of night, and it would have a course that was all set out. So it's typically set like you would have at a contest where you would be going to predetermined turn points. But you as an instructor can predetermine what you want student to do. You can do it that way.
It sounds like what Bill's asking is if you want them to kind of have to start going in a particular direction towards the turn point, and then he'd want to say, oh, you can't make it, you got to go, now you got to go over there. Just alternate location.
Yeah, you can do that. You can easily do that. You won't have the same
Results. I mean,
you won't have all of your navigation equipment here set up as a go-to for that. You can't do like you would in flight, on like on an LX9000, you can just have go-to a different point, point and fly there. You can't do that in the air. That's one thing that's bad.
Yeah.
So, but you could certainly, I could be doing this flight and I could have landed at any of the other airports here, and that's not a problem. It'll easily do that, but you just won't have the same setup in your computer.
Oh, it would sort of skew the results, because then you would say, well, you didn't finish, well, you could still finish the task, but it would just change the data, because now you're not trying to, now you're going off the task, basically.
Well, at the end, you still can do this. You can still analyze your flight. You can still see your flight.
Right.
It won't look like this, you'll have a flight. Let's say you went over to Mojave or something, and you can easily go over the student with, well, what did you do? What was your altitude when you're coming across here? Did you make good decisions? All that kind of stuff. You can easily do that.
Yeah.
Do you have to set up a task, or can you just fly around?
You can just fly around if you like.
Yeah.
That was something I should have mentioned. When I first started cutting the apron strings, that's basically what I was doing, was just flying around all the time. And even then I would just go where it looked good. And that's what still a lot of people do. And it wasn't until I started paying attention to flying and looking at the weather and creating tasks where other guys would, Jim Staniforth was always putting tasks out to fly for the day. That's actually when I realized, hey, this is a lot of fun. It's a lot more challenging, and it's a lot more fulfilling as well if you actually complete it and do it.
Sure.
So this kind of gets you into that habit of making a decision as to what you're going to do for the day. People always ask you, well, where are you going to go today? And I was always saying, I'm going to go north as far as I can. Well, that's kind of a dumb question. And then I realized, no, that is a good question.
Yeah.
How come I don't have a plan?
Right.
Just go north, huh? So
Yeah,
I think
How
it
do
is.
I? Oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead, sorry.
Go ahead, Mark.
Oh, how do I get the local scenery?
Good question.
That's a good question. I tried not to make this a tutorial on how to use Condor, but it is once you get Condor, it only comes with one, what they call them landscapes or sceneries. I think they use it interchangeably. You only get one, and it's in Slovenia, which is okay. You can fly there. It's not exactly helpful for learning your local landmarks and whatnot. So you have to download various landscapes, and this one is called SoCal. Like I mentioned, it's made by Jim Ketchum. You go into the Condor Club and you can download it. It's free. You don't have to pay anything. I think you may have to pay to join the Condor Club. Can't remember now.
I think there's a subscription.
Yeah, you get a subscription, and you can download them, and then you don't have to subscribe anymore if you don't want to. The hard part is that these are pretty they're pretty big files, and it takes a long time to have them downloaded. It doesn't always go smooth, and that's why I was kind of chuckling, because it is a pain in the butt. fortunately, I'm good buddy with Jim Ketchum, so he put it in a Dropbox for me. And I had poof pesto, I had it.
Mhm.
But
That's what I
there's,
did too. And
So
yeah,
yeah, it
is
was
he
too
willing?
slow the other way. And
it's really
it's about
hard
11
it's,
gigabytes. It was 11,
Yeah.
1 gigabyte, maybe a little less if it's compressed.
Yeah.
well, Jim actually did a good job. He put together the SoCal landscape, which goes all the way up to Bridgeport, all the way down to Mexican border, and there's strip, so it doesn't have a lot of width, so you have to kind of be careful where you put it, because you could easily have a lot of area that we wouldn't fly in, and then you're missing area that you want to fly in. And the one that was previously for California went from Canada all the way to Mexico. It was huge. I still have that one. It's just so awkward. It always bombed out. It was a real problem. So Jim came up with this SoCal one, and then has another one called Truckee. Truckee goes from basically Susanville due south to about Lone Pine. So there is some crossover. You can't use them at the same time. You have to switch from one to the other. So if you want to plan a cross country up, let's say from Tehachapi to Truckee, you're going to have both of them. You'll have to stop and then remember where you were, and then insert yourself in the next one. I've done it. It's kind of a chore. It's not worth doing, to be, in my opinion.
Yeah. I typed in
There is a
the,
really nice one that was done for the Warner Springs area, and it's very small. It only goes from San Jacinto down to the Mexican border. So for Warner, it was really nice just flying that, except you miss out all the Big Bear flying, and it doesn't go very far east or west either. It was kind of a narrow strip, but it is easy and quick to download on the Condor Club. I think it's called San Diego, as I recall.
yeah, I typed in the URL for the Condor. It's just www.condor.club, and you do have to sign up and get a subscription. And so I guess what I would ask Dan is, how would we politely ask Jim to share that? Was there a way to have him post it somewhere, like in the Tehachapi groups? Do you guys
I was going to talk to him today, but he was flying, and so I
Good for him.
texted him when he landed him, and I congratulated him on his flight. But I told him I was going to plug his landscape, and he said, "Good."
Okay, well, I mean, I certainly would be
So-
willing to throw some money at him if he wants to.
Oh, no, I don't think he wants that. I think there's just a way that we can easily put it out there. It's going to need to be on
Right.
I think he did it with me on Dropbox, as I recall.
This
Yeah,
is
that's
Walt
what I was
Rogers
thinking.
here. I have a Dropbox subscription was plenty big enough just to hold it, so I could host it. And besides that, I'd like to get a more updated version from him. Since the last time I got it from him, I'm sure there's been additions and changes, added features and so forth.
Yeah, he's had, I think, 3 updates on it. Well,
Yeah. Let him know that I'd be willing to just get it into my Dropbox, and then I can just share it publicly, and anybody can just go to a link.
okay.
Excellent.
Oh,
Might as well
I'll give
get
him a
my
call.
money's worth out of Dropbox and let you guys download it.
Right.
I'll give him a call tomorrow and chat with him. He's pretty sharp on all this stuff, so he would know the best way to do it all.
Hey,
Cool.
Dan, John Chapman. 2 questions for you. The first one is there's a lot of, quote, standard aviation tools available, such as FAA sectionals. Is it possible to use those for scenarios or landscapes? Or they're completely incompatible?
No,
Okay,
the
yeah. I can live with no. The second question is a bit different. Is many areas have a lot of turn points, user knowledge, local area knowledge, whatever you want to call it, available to them. For example, Jim Staniforth has 1,000+ points scattered up and down the scenario.
yeah, typically,
plug those in.
yeah, I'm not a landscape developer like Jim Ketchum is, but I know that it cannot handle that many turn points that we would have. It has most of them. As you can see, I used rock pile.
Oh, yeah, I'm a lot familiar with
You know, it's got a dead car. It's got a lot of them on there. All these little ones here that are yellow. Can you see my pointer? So that's what's that, Three Sisters, and here's Cache Peak. So he's got a lot of them in there. That's that, I forget the name of that mountain over here by
Chuck
Cal
Wallem.
City area. Yeah, there you are. And, so he's got a lot of them in there.
Mhm.
Well, one of the
Yes.
nice things to do is when you've got a beautiful day is to overlay the lift band on top of the mountain system you got to work in and then pick your turn points.
Hmm. That'd be a
Yep.
good way to go about it.
Yep.
That's it.
Yeah, and then, back to your other question, there is a manual on how to make landscapes, and I never bothered
wow.
to. I started to read it, and I said, that's enough.
Mhm.
It's pretty intense. There's a fair bit of work to do it, and it pixelates. I believe it uses. I think it's Google Earth, actually. Is what it
Hmm.
uses.
Oh,
I may be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that.
okay. I've got a couple of quick questions. Well, I think they're quick questions for you, Dan. So you're saying, this is part of the whole objective here is to understand, really kind of get to see the landscape and, get it into your brain, what's what and where. And I've fooled out a little bit of Condor. I haven't really used it a few times, but I'm trying to remember if you can actually just turn your head or you have to actually turn the glider to look around. Is there a way
Yeah,
to
on
turn
the
your head?
stick, on the stick, you can set it up to where you use the center button,
Mm-hmm.
and you can slew your point of view all the way around, and then or you can use your mouse if
Uh-huh.
you want to fly two-handed. I
Right.
usually put the mouse in the left hand because I get it all screwed up, and then if you click both left and right button, it'll automatically come right back to the straight ahead view here.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can slew all the way around. As a matter of fact, that's a really good question, and I should have mentioned that. A lot of people have trouble because they just see this view, and like I mentioned, it's like looking through a soda straw, so it's awkward.
Right.
You don't
Yeah.
have the situational awareness.
Right.
And using the mouse or the top hat button on your stick, you
Mhm.
can assign the stick, and like I said, I don't want to get into all the details here of
Right.
what you can do with the stick. You can assign all of the various controls on your stick to have the functions that Condor offers. And one of them that I like is being able to slew it around and just have a look. And
Right.
when I'm using it, I'm doing that all the time.
Mhm.
Like I say, I keep the mouse in my left hand, and when I get lost, I just click both, and I'm automatically right back straight ahead, and off I
Right.
go.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
Yeah, general comment upon that. There's two kind of different Condor worlds. With the beginner system, it's pretty easy to do everything that Dan is pointing out and do. If you want to step up to a gaming computer with a powerful video card in it, now you can go the virtual headset and do all kinds of magic. But there's a couple of $1,000s price difference between the two.
Oh wow.
Yeah, that's what I mentioned.
Yeah.
Jim Ketchum uses virtual reality goggles, I forget the Oculus
Oculus. Yeah.
goggles.
Right.
And
Yeah. My
it takes-
plan, I'm sorry, go ahead.
that's okay.
Oh, my plan is I'm building a simulator for the kids at the EAA Chapter 40 using a RS-15 fuselage that I got from Bob Kupendal. And the plan is so that we can make it transportable to take it to the malls and wherever we want to take it for fundraising. It won't have a monitor. It will have Oculus Quest and then maybe a laptop that will just show what people can see from the outside what's going on. But I'm designing my own stick. I designed my own rudder pedals, flap sliders, spoilers, everything. So I'm putting that together right now. So hopefully we should have it done in a month or two.
And then that works out.
And then we'll use it to teach the kids. And I found that there was someone selling like Condor lessons where it was fly straight, fly around this, do that, try stalls. So we'll probably get that, and then we can divide the kids up. Some kids are building, and then it's hard to keep all the kids engaged, and we can give the other kids involved in using the simulator.
Yeah, there's a fellow that writes an article just about every month in Soaring magazine. From the SSA.
Scott Wiley.
Scott Manley.
Scott Manley.
Scott Manley.
Yeah. He has a tremendous. Hello. He has a tremendous curriculum that he puts the students all through. I think it's a little overkill myself, but maybe because I'm already a pilot. But kids seem to enjoy it.
Yeah, no, it's great. Appreciate the,
Thanks.
really appreciate Mark putting that together. I've been talking to him, and Bill Burrow is also involved with EAA, and it's just, that'll be a super way to really catch, youngsters' attention and let them know that, hey, we're out there and this is something, you should try yourself. So I had
One of the-
another- go ahead.
One of the, just let me say one thing, that one of the cautions that I would be careful with, I would suggest you would try the Oculus Rift out a few times before you go to all that effort of only planning on going that far. I've flown with simulators at work which is a few years ago now. Some of the displays and some of the displays is the wrong word. Some of the landscapes that were being going through on the computer when you're looking through the goggles, they can make you motion sick really fast.
Yeah.
And they have like a little lag to them, a little jitter. It just drives you crazy. And there were a few times where I was flying some, and these are some pretty high performance aircraft. I would not feel right for the rest of the day.
Oh,
So
Well, it's pretty, if it doesn't work out, then I can just install 2 or 3 monitors or something. So I have,
that was where I was going to hit.
I have provisions to add if I need to.
Yeah, that was where I was headed. The ones that I preferred flying were very smooth and very nice. Would just have enough screens to get front screen and 2 side screens. It would get you out
Yeah.
your peripheral vision, and those were really good. And I've flown in full 360 domes a few times with full motion too.
oh,
And well, that one was pretty wild. But that's a big dome on the end of a big arm, a
Right.
huge hangar, and that was pretty wild. But you can really get a lot just with a couple of screens.
that sounds good. I do have a question about McCready settings because I'm still, I'm still new enough to still try asking questions about McCready. So if you're changing your McCready speed or dial, that doesn't really change the flight profile within the glider itself. Is that correct statement? Or I'm not
sure
sure
how to
I'm
answer
asking the
that.
question. Yeah. It just seems like you're,
Should I try to answer?
yeah, sure.
Yes,
Cindy, go ahead.
please. Let the instructors know how to answer that kind of question.
Okay, setting a McCready setting is to set your anticipated thermal strengths in the
Right.
upcoming thermals that you will encounter.
Right, I know that part.
And what that will then tell you to fly for speed to fly in the speed directing part
Right.
of the instrument is to have you spend at a similar rate of altitude loss that will then be matched by your rate of climb in your next thermal.
Right.
It's kind of like estimating your gas mileage.
Right,
If I have a McCready of 7, I'm going to be ripping around with my foot to the floor all day.
right,
If I think that the lift is going to soften, or I'm going to move into an area with less lift or more headwind or a ridge in front of me that I want to get over the top of, I would like to enhance my gas mileage. So I could dial the McCready to a lower setting on the instrumentation,
right,
which is then going to direct me to fly more slowly, closer to best LD speed,
right.
instead of something that is faster than best LD speed. Does that answer it for you, Chris?
Yeah, I think so. It's just when he said he was changing it, like when he got up to, like Dan said, when he got up to first turn point, I think, Dan, you said you changed it to 7.
We'll come back to the polar here, but yeah, when I first
And-
was,
Yeah,
where
so
was I? We got our task, and here we are. We're at 3.5, and we're not going to make it.
right,
Now at the end, let's go all the way to the end where it showed I could make it, but I could slow down. See, if I wanted to continue at 3.1, I'll make it.
sure,
Okay. So that's going slow. And I
Right.
decided that was not good. So I went over and got more because I didn't like how low it was going to put me.
yeah,
So I went up higher, and then pedal to the metal, as Cindy said.
Right.
And what, maybe another way of showing it, I'm sure you've seen this in textbooks. If you look at a polar here, and this is 0 at the corner, and this line is tangent to the polar, and that's where your best L over D is.
Right.
If McCready is going to be the same equal points above here, then that line would drop down and it's going to go way out to here where it becomes tangent.
Right.
If I were up that really high. So what we're saying is that's with a high McCready, and if I go back and set it lower, I'm going to be coming up closer to the best L over D. Now the best L over D at this wing loading is right about 66 knots.
Yeah.
And that's another thing you do is you can actually dump the ballast in Condor as well.
Oh, right. Sure.
Hey guys,
Good.
I gotta check out. I gotta put the kid to bed, but thank you so much. It was great.
Great.
Sure.
Thanks. Good seeing you, Mark.
All right,
Appreciate it.
bye-bye.
Thanks for
Bye-bye.
joining. Yeah, so I guess the quick answer is that, once you've got altitude, then you dial up both altitude, and if the weather is improving and there's many more thermals and obviously, better thermal day, then you appropriately change your McCready to match the altitude and or thermal strengths.
Well, and that's what this is, hopefully would give you some experience in doing,
Right.
and using that and being able to see what a good McCready you should be using.
Sure.
And what changing the McCready does. If you dial it, in this case, I'm at 3.5. If I start really lowering it, this red dot comes down, and you say, oh, okay, if I fly slow, I can get there. But then I also keep track of the fact I may never get there in this particular case because I'll be just way too low.
Yeah. Right. I guess that's
So you get a feel for it is what I'm trying to say, without having to, you can't really get a feel for it when you're flying your glider. Too busy flying your glider. When you're sitting in your den doing all this, it's time that you can understand and contemplate better what it actually is doing.
Sure, you can noodle around and see the results.
Exactly.
What's the DH and the DDH stand for?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. DH is your current altitude above or below the turn point. So we're currently 3,222 feet above the rock pile.
Requiring.
But then the DD
means decision
is
height.
estimated.
Decision
Sorry.
height.
Yeah. And then this is the estimated arrival at your turn point. Well, that's bad because it's negative.
Yeah, right.
So the DH is in what? MSL?
Feet from your current altitude.
Oh, correct.
So 3,000 feet lower than you're at now, and you'll get there 1,000 feet below the hilltop. Is that what it's trying to say, or
No,
or is
you're
that
3,000? You're 3,222 feet above the turn point. But
okay?
so
Right now.
Yeah, what's
Right.
right now? That's pretty meaningless in my opinion, because what are you going to be when you get there, right?
Right. Yeah, that doesn't really.
It's a little wonky. It's not.
Yeah.
It's not as I showed all this to Jim Staniforth one time, and he's just, oh, this is a terrible flight computer. Yeah, it is. It's not anything like what we're used to in some regards, but you can get a lot of experience using it that directly relates to an UDI or any of the other fancier flight computers.
Dan, this is Walt Rogers. I just wanted to say that I'm going to reload Condor 2 and start reusing it in the next few weeks here, because I'm going to interface my CU Navigator, which is what the UDN uses, with
Right.
Condor, and to learn the user interface and to get familiar with it while I'm flying.
That's a really
Condor.
good point. That's a really good point. I did not bring that up. You can actually, I know one guy, oh gosh, I can't think of his name right now. He's out in Las Vegas. He takes his LX 9000 out of his glider, and he's got a little cradle that he puts it in, and he flies with his LX 9000 in Condor.
Oh my God.
I mean, yeah, exactly. I'm not willing to do that. It's not worth that much to me, but there's a lot of, there's a cradle for a UDI that I know one of my buddies uses, the guy that bought my SW20, and because he wanted to learn how to use the UDI better. So you're good point, Walt. I forgot to bring that up.
Yeah, you can do that with the original UDI and CU Mobile, but CU Navigator is freely available. You really need to have the CU subscription, which is $60 a year to make it work properly. I don't know, it might be workable without that, but you pretty much have to pay the $60 a year. CU Navigator will run on an Android phone or an iPhone, which I use in the cockpit. I use an Android phone. So
Yeah.
I want to practice with this and just, see on some final glides how it works. And
So
by the
if
way,
you
that
just,
question about locating myself in the airspace somewhere, that's one of the things I want to be able to do to practice a final glide. And I think I remember Scott Manley talking about that there is a way to do that. I just don't know what it is. So the problem with using Condor to learn your instruments is you have to do it in real time. Like fly a task in real time or fly a final
Yes.
glide, and that's kind of awkward.
Yeah.
The other software, open source software that I've been using for years is called LK8000, which also runs on Android and other things. Some people use XC-Soar. It's kind of related to that software. But anyway, with LK8000, you can run a simulator on a PC and put yourself somewhere and fly around and, and do it and move yourself to a new location. So I routinely use that every spring or late winter to get familiar with my flight software. Even the things I've been using for 5 years, I need to kind of review all the user interface to do that. So Condor would be useful for that. It would be a lot more useful if you could free fly around and put yourself and practice glides, practice making turn points and seeing how the user interface works on a real flight computer.
there is a simulator that is used for all of the LX products. It is really cool. See if I can call it up.
Dan, could I interject for a second?
Sure.
Condor seems like a huge mountain to climb for most people, but it's not. The key to the whole show in many cases is there are user groups associated with Condor. Just about everywhere on the planet, you got a gliding club. So what you try and do, if possible, is hook up with the local folks. They can lead you to the detailed scenarios for your area, what works, what doesn't work. And it's kind of an idea pool that you can pull from very, very easily. And it's also kind of nice when you've got 2 or 3 people in the same environment flying a mini contest together. You learn a lot by leeching. It's an old-fashioned trick, but you can do it in Condor too.
That's a good point, John. I appreciate you making that comment. And I wonder if it would be useful for within, Southern California could we set up contests or set up tasks that we would then, for some of the newbie cross-country pilots, we would pick a night and we would, have a little local contest. Is that something we could set up?
It's
Yeah,
certainly
we could easily do
possible.
that.
There's already a group in Lake Elsinore of about a half a dozen Condor nuts, and they're using VR and monitors indiscriminately between them. They're racing around Southern California, southeast of us.
Oh, cool. Great.
So can you guys see the screen I'm sharing?
Yes, we can.
Okay, so this is the LX9000, and they have this simulator for all of the LX products, and it's really cool and great to learn. This has got one of my flights in it, and I can just hit play and set the speed and speed it up a little bit, which is kind of nice. And I can see myself flying around and speed it up even more here. And I can learn how to use all the various controls. This is the first waypoints. And then I've got all of my checklists on there, just like I have in my glider. I can go back to airport page. Unfortunately, I don't know why it's going black. There we go. And it's going in and out of black. But as far as simulators go, this is phenomenal. And I really, matter of fact, when I first got my glider, I'll get out of that. That's not good. So I turned on my LX9000 and I started playing with it, doing all kinds of stuff. Rex Mays is watching me. Of course, he's a ClearNav dealer. And he says, "Oh, you must have had a LX9000 before." I said, "No, it was the first one I've ever seen." I learned everything how to use it on the simulator, which I think is what you're saying too, John.
Yeah,
Once you get, it really helps you get through the learning curve.
yeah.
And
Well, that's how I learned how to use that LK8000 on the simulator, and you could speed it up too. It was really nice. You could play an IGC file through it. And I was talking to one of the reps from Navitier, who they maintain CU Navigator. I said, you need to add that to your software so you can play back flights
Yeah.
and speed it up, because otherwise it takes you a couple of seasons to really learn how to use your flight computer.
yeah,
Hmm.
I said the same thing to Rex with ClearNav, and I think they're working on one. He said, I just thought it was a gimmick, and then I showed him on my computer. I said, here's how I learned everything, and and he was really impressed.
It's an LX tool, by the way. The title, I believe, is LX Sim, LXSIM. You showed us version 804, but it'll take just about every LX product from an S100 to a 9070, whatever. You can dial them in, configure to match almost anything you want.
That's what I said. It has all of the LX products are simulated.
What the S1 LX Nav S100 does not have a simulator.
That's correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
let's
All of
not,
the I don't know what the list is. I don't want to call it up again, but there's
All the LX 9000 related products.
well,
have a
LX, yeah,
simulator.
there's the oh gosh, the 8080 and those that it is a simulator for those.
It's kind of
Okay,
picky. There are all kinds of
let's-
versions. Not everybody's on the sim, but a lot are.
okay, well, if you don't mind, let's not get into the weeds on LX Nav and all the sims, the other high-tech gear
That's
for
a-
that.
That's another porch
Yeah,
chat for a different
yeah,
day.
Yeah, we're getting into the weeds with all the high-tech stuff, so if
Hey,
anyone else
Christopher?
has,
Yeah, Christopher, I
ahead.
have one more thing that
Sure.
I want to just make an announcement. Some of you may know, most of you may not, but a couple of weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I nominated Christopher Stevenson as to be the governor of Southern California, Region 12. And he accepted that, and he's now listed as the governor for our region. So I think he is the most interested and active member for introducing soaring to people in all of Southern California with these
Oh.
porch chats. So thank you for taking the nomination, Christopher.
Congratulations, Christopher.
Yeah, thank you.
And I also want to give a thank you to John Chapman for giving his registration for the Soaring Convention. John was unable to make it
Thank
due to
you.
health reasons. And I think Christopher got a great introduction to some of the people. It was pretty trying event at the SSA convention with snow and everything. Just so many sights and things to see and do while you're in there that it was quite overwhelming, wasn't it, Christopher?
Yeah, you want to be 4 or 5 people at once and go into every different talk, but it was definitely worthwhile. And again, thank you, John, for providing that to me. It was very, very worthwhile, and I'm very pleased and honored to show up and be there. And so I'll just say that anybody has any ideas about getting the word out to getting either new members and especially new young members, Walt will be probably sharing later on with a lot of us about ideas that the SSA is working on to just keep our club and keep our sport active and going and strong.
And by the way, there is such thing as a lieutenant governor, which means anybody who's willing to volunteer and help outreach and soaring. I'd be happy to nominate you and give you a title, but you don't have to be the full-fledged governor. In fact, the full-fledged governor can only do what he can do, he or she.
Yes,
So
yeah.
I welcome that, and I understand that this is all volunteerism.
Exactly.
You're doing a great job, Christopher.
Well, thank you. Just get the word out. Just maybe I should put together. Well, I do have a little cheat sheet of all the soaring chats, but I'll make it something a little more flashy and something you can just stick on any billboard you see somewhere, and just get the word out. So, all right. Well, Dan, as again, you always do a great presentation. So thank you so much for putting your time and effort into this, and we'll get the YouTube a little editing that I have to do to take out some of the extra chatter, but it'll be on the AVSC YouTube channel. You can rewatch that at any time. And please return in 2 weeks. Our good soaring youngster, Zach Yamachi, will be talking about OLC versus reglide. So he'll give us the whole input and insight on that. So thanks again for joining, everybody, and we'll see you next time.
Hey,
Thank
when
you.
Christopher,
Thank you,
so
Christopher.
Good night, everyone.
No,
Bye.
bye.
I have a
Yeah,
Christopher.
go ahead, Bill.
So I have that talk for the OLC versus reglide as April 19th. And the
Oh, okay.
speaker for the 22nd was TBD, deep dive into soaring apps for new cross-country pilots. Is that what is real for next week? You know?
Yeah, I've got Zach for next week, and then April 19th, TBD soaring apps. So,
And so who's doing the talk next week on?
yeah, Zach, well, in 2 weeks, it's Zach. Every 2 weeks.
Right. And on the 22nd, who's doing that?
Yeah.
Bill
20
is.
22nd is Zach. No,
No.
March 22nd, 2 weeks is Zach. That's what I have on my calendar. And then the TBD soaring apps is April 19th. I'll send out the update and I'll
Yeah, send me an
confirm.
update because I
Yeah,
obviously
sure. Yeah, okay. We'll do that. All
All
right.
right, thank you.
Sure.
Bye.
Okay, see you guys.
See you
Good
all.
night.
Thanks.
Thank you.